With the growing demand for housing in Jamaica, it is no surprise that persons have been opting to buy homes in residential developments before they are constructed. And while the idea of buying a home pre-construction may be appealing, especially to first-time homeowners, there are special factors that purchasers of pre-construction properties must consider before entering into a prepayment contract. Christina Brown, partner at DunnCox and member of the Conveyancing Department, is our guest to provide clarity on this topic: buying property pre-construction, considerations for the purchaser. Christina, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dion.
Well, I'm so looking forward to today's topic, Christina. It's always a pleasure hearing what you have to say. Let's start off. What is a prepayment contract?
Okay, so it's essentially a contract in which a purchaser agrees with a developer to make payments towards a purchase of a property in a development, for example, a townhouse or an apartment, before construction is complete. So the purchase of the property, Dion, is done based on the architectural plans and the specifications for the development. And the sale of properties under these types of contracts is regulated by the Real Estate Dealers and Developers Act.
Good. So next, Christina, what should a prospective purchaser do before entering into a prepayment contract?
Okay, so because these contracts tend to be a bit more technical than usual, we usually advise prospective purchasers to retain the services of an experienced real estate attorney to provide the required legal advice. Also, you want to ensure that you conduct checks at the real estate board to confirm that the developer is registered under the applicable legislation. Because a lot of times we hear stories of persons buying into developments only to hear a few months down the road that the developer has run off with their money. So to avoid that, you want to ensure that, whichever developer you're buying from, that person is registered under legislation. You also want to ensure that you inquire whether the developer has obtained planning permission and approvals for the development. And most importantly, purchasers should ensure that they examine the floor plans and the specifications for the unit that they're purchasing. And these plans should be made available by the developer for inspection.
So are there any advantages in buying property pre-construction?
Yes, there are many advantages, but I'll just mention a few. One of them is that early purchasers can purchase their unit at a much lower price based on discounted rates that are offered by developers. So if you were to purchase that same unit after construction, you would end up paying significantly more. So there is an advantage in buying before construction, right? Also, the earliest purchasers tend to have the best choice of units. So, for example, if you're buying into a strata complex, you might want a corner unit as opposed to a middle unit. So that is one advantage as well. Another advantage is the ability to actually customize your unit, right? So sometimes developers will allow purchasers to make personalized upgrades to the finishings, for example, the kitchen counters or the flooring during construction. And what this does, Dion, is that it eventually increases the resale value of your home.
We're speaking with Christina Brown, partner at DunnCox and a member of the Conveyancing Department. And this is the one that I know a lot of persons are keenly listening to know. What are some of the potential pitfalls of pre-construction purchases?
Okay, so there are a few, and one of the main ones is construction delays. So although some contracts provide a projected date for completion of the development, in a lot of cases, the construction is delayed because of factors such as shortages of labor or materials. And most contracts will protect the developer from liability for these kinds of delays. So if it is that you intend to live in the unit that you're purchasing, you may end up having to wait longer than you planned. Another disadvantage is escalation. So most prepayment contracts include an escalation clause, which basically allows the developer to adjust the purchase price upwards on completion to account for things like inflation or increased costs in labor and materials. And in some cases, the amount of escalation is capped. It's capped at a certain amount, right? So prospective purchasers should ensure that they budget for any escalation costs. There may also be variations in finishing. And as the saying goes, what you see is not always what you get. So at the end of construction, there could be some minor changes in the finished product when compared to the original plans and specifications that you would have seen at the beginning. And most of the contracts, the prepayment contracts, they exempt the developer from liability to pay compensation for minor variations in things like the shape and the dimensions of the unit in certain circumstances. And another disadvantage, Dion, is defects, right? So defects in finishing are almost inevitable in newly constructed properties, right? So a purchaser should always ensure that the contract provides for a defects liability period in which any defects that may be listed at the time of practical completion can be brought to the attention of the developer for them to be remedied. So those are just some of the disadvantages
Can you share
that
this?
are associated.
Can you share this, Christina? What
Sure.
does practical completion mean in pre-construction sales?
All right, so practical completion, Leon, basically occurs when an architect or quantity surveyor certifies that the unit that is being constructed has reached a stage where it is nearly complete and it is ready for occupancy, right? So it's habitable. And at that stage, purchasers should ensure that they conduct what we call a pre-closing inspection of the unit so that any concerns that they may have or any defects that they might notice can be addressed at that time, right? And most prepayment contracts provide for completion of the sale to occur within a specified time after the issuing of a practical completion certificate. And the time for completion might be short beyond, so purchasers should ensure that they have all their funds in place to complete the transaction on being given notice to complete. There's a lot more I could say about,
But if there's
buying property pre-construction.
if there's anyone else who
Sure.
wants other questions answered, then how do we get in touch with you?
Well, you can send me an email at christina.brown@DunnCox.com, or you may call the number 876-922-1500.
And that's www.DUNNCOX.com.
Yes.
Before you leave, though, do you have any hashtag did you know tidbits for us
Well,
today?
not
We love hearing those.
Not necessarily a hashtag, but we're like a takeaway, new isn't always better.
I could say that to so many things, but let us take that and say thank you, Christina Brown, partner at DunnCox and member of the Conveyancing Department, giving us today in our Legal Landscape, Season 6, Episode 10, Buying Property Pre-Construction Considerations for the Purchaser. Thank you, Christina.
Thanks for having me, Dion.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
But, Patrice, you're just listening and, how to do it. It's best to get the best information possible to break it down. What are the pros? What are the not so pros, but something that's to your benefit if you have the time or don't have the time? This is The Edge. Join us next week for another informative and detailed legal landscape here on The Edge.